Welcome. This module is part of our series on artificial intelligence. This module will be different from some of the previous. As opposed to discussing the theory associated with machine learning, we're going to demonstrate practically how to configure a Windows PC. Sorry, we won't be doing the same for macOS and Linux, to compile and execute Python scripts that employ machine learning relevant libraries like PyTorch within Microsoft's Visual Studio Code Integrated Development Environment, or IDE. Note that from this point forward, we're going to refer to the software as VS Code. We are aware that developers may install Python manually on their machines and execute Python scripts within Windows command prompt. Now, we prefer VS Code because it allows us to create Python projects and workspaces within virtual environments or containers, such that they are separated from one another and unaffected by changes to the versions of libraries installed or used by other projects. The goal of this module is to demonstrate how one may configure a PC to run Python scripts within VS Code, to create a Python workspace within a VENV virtual environment, to properly configure that environment, to install relevant libraries, one example being PyTorch, and how to execute a Python script, hopefully a machine learning relevant or PyTorch dependent script, one that calls upon some of those libraries. To create our isolated workspace, we employ the VENV virtual environment provided by VS Code. VENV is a lightweight tool that helps us manage project dependencies efficiently by isolating them from global Python installations. This approach is considered a best practice in Python development because it ensures that projects remain independent and easier to maintain. So the first thing that I want to do here in this tutorial is actually uninstall Python. To ensure a consistent starting point for this tutorial, we begin by searching Add Remove Programs within Windows and removing all installed Python versions. This is not absolutely necessary, but may prevent certain problems with the virtual environment configuration down the road. So I click here on Search. We already see the option to add or remove programs. I search for Python, and as you see, it doesn't come up because I've already removed it from this machine. Next, we install VS Code on our Windows PC. This process is straightforward with Windows installation packages available from Microsoft, so we're going to assume there's no need to discuss this process at length and that it's already installed and we can simply open the application. Okay, so once VS Code is installed, we need to create a folder to contain our project. So we're going to create a folder, which we named Project Test 01, to house our virtual environment, aka our entire project workspace, including the Python scripts that we intend to execute. So let's open up Windows Explorer, go to the appropriate folder, and you can see I've already created this subfolder Project Test 01, so that's good to go. Next, we search for VS Code within Windows and initiate the software. For those that regularly use VS Code, it may automatically load a previously or existing project. We want to create an entirely new workspace, and as such, we must open a new project window. So let's go down to the Windows search bar, type in Visual Studio Code. It opens right up, and like I said, you can see there is a pre-existing project already loaded. I don't want that, so we're going to go up to the File tab, click on New Window, maximize that, and now we see a completely empty workspace, which is what we want at this moment. So as we saw a second ago, our new workspace is initially empty, and we want to add the Project Test 01 folder to that workspace. So we do this by going to the Add Folder to Workspace option underneath the File menu tab, and after that we should see the appropriate folder appear within the workspace in the screen or the GUI's top left corner. So our new workspace is completely empty. I want to add our project folder. I'm going to go under the File tab, click on Add Folder to Workspace, go to the appropriate location on my hard drive. Remember that name, Project Test 01, add that to my project, go up here to the top left-hand corner where the Explorer is, and now we can see that the Project Test 01 folder is added to the workspace within VS Code. Before we may develop and execute machine learning Python scripts, or really any Python scripts we must install or reinstall Python to our machine, we can do this manually through python.org, downloading the appropriate installer, or we can simply use the Microsoft Store. We're going to choose to install version 3.11.9 from the Microsoft Store because I know it's compatible and also it's just the easiest option. We must also add the Python extension to our VS Code workspace or to the application, allowing us to choose a Python interpreter as well as use some supplementary tools. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Microsoft Store. I'm going to search for Python. All right, we should see version 3.11 come up, which is the one that I've chosen to install. Just click the Install button. Very straightforward. We may have to wait for 30 seconds here for this to install. All right, 15, 20. %, almost done. 80%. All right, great. And we can see Microsoft Store is confirming that it has been successfully installed. So I'm going to minimize that. I'm going to go back to my VS Code window. I'm going to click on this icon right here, the one that kind of looks like Tetris. This allows us to install extensions. So I am going to search for Python. I know it was already up there, but I'm going to search again. And we should see one of the first ones that comes up is Python language support from Microsoft. I'm going to go ahead and click install, and that's usually pretty fast, and then we can go back to our workspace. We are not yet ready, however, to execute Python scripts that employ the PyTorch machine learning library, nor execute scripts within a virtual environment or container. So to address these issues, we are going to press Ctrl-Shift-P, which brings the cursor to the search bar at the top of the GUI. We choose Python:create environment, the venv option, as well as the version of Python 3.11.9, should also say Microsoft Store. We're going to choose the version that we just installed. If successful, we should see the message creating environment in the bottom right-hand corner, and then at the end it should say the following environment is selected, and then show the location, again in the bottom right corner of the screen. Furthermore, our project should contain a new folder under the heading .venv and include subfolders such as include, library, and scripts. If this process fails, you should try disabling any Dropbox or Google Drive syncing. That can cause a problem. So before I try to create my virtual environment, I'm going to go down to Dropbox. I am going to pause sync for an hour. All right, I'm actually going to X out this window with the extension in it. Okay, I am going to hit Ctrl-Shift-P, which moves the cursor up top. I click on Create Environment. I choose the venv option. You can see here, this is the version of Python we installed just a second ago, 3.11.9 from the Microsoft Store. And now in the bottom right-hand corner, we can see Creating Environment. Hopefully this succeeds. All right, great, so it succeeded. The following environment is selected, and then it shows the location of the environment. If it fails, it does usually present a pretty obvious failure message, which should indicate to you that there's an issue. Next, we may create a simple Python test script to run. We can choose New File under the File tab and elect for the Python option. We then enter a short test script. We're just going to use something like Hello World, save it to a new folder within the workspace, but generally it's best if we keep that external to the .venv main folder and execute the script via the play button in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Now, if that button is not present, then generally that means there was an issue with the Python installation or creation of the venv virtual environment. We expect this script to run properly, displaying the message within the VS Code's terminal window. All right, so let's go up here to the Workspace Explorer. If we open up our main project folder, we can see that the virtual environment was created as we expect. It has the subfolders include, library, scripts, etc. Now what I did was I created a folder called My Scripts outside of the venv folder to contain all the scripts that I'm going to create. And that's pretty easy to do. All you have to do is right click on the main folder and select the new folder option. Now I already have a script within that subfolder, but again, it's pretty easy to create that new Python script. All you have to do is right click on the folder that you want to house the script, then choose New File, and then we can name this anything. As long as we give it a py extension, VS Code will recognize that it's a Python script. But anyway, I've already created one with some sample code in here, so we're going to go ahead and use this script test 01, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this. All right, great. So we have our test script. Ignore this for right now. We're going to use it later. But let's just go ahead and test its ability to print Hello World. All right, so we go up here. Like I said, in the top right-hand corner, there's a play button that allows us to execute the Python script. And now you can see within the terminal, it returns the message Hello World. So that means that this is working as we expect. Next, we need to choose an appropriate Python interpreter. So the interpreter is a Python runtime environment that VS Code uses to execute our scripts. It determines which Python version is used, as well as which libraries and dependencies are available. We may select a Python interpreter within VS Code by, again, pressing Shift-Control-P, which brings the cursor to the search bar at the top of the GUI. We then choose Python:/select interpreter, as well as the version associated with our venv environment, and it should be appropriately labeled. We'll see that in a second. This ensures that our script employs the version of Python installed to the virtual environment or container, regardless of what changes are made to the PC's main Python installation. We may execute our Hello World script again, and that generates or should generate the same result. So let's press Ctrl-Shift-P, that moves the cursor up top. We are going to choose Select Interpreter, and now you can see we have two options. We have the global installation, which we used previously, but we want to choose the one that's associated with our virtual environment, and that is recommended. So we click on that, and now we can go ahead and use that same play button we did a second ago to run the script again. and we end up with the same result as one would expect. Our next goal is to execute a Python script that employs the PyTorch library or package, and you actually saw that script. It was part of the example that I showed a second ago. It was commented out. So we're going to replace the hello world code within that script and run it again. However, what we're going to see is that VS Code will return an error, right? Module not found error, no module named Torch is found. And that's because we haven't added PyTorch to our virtual environment yet. We may do so using VS Code's terminal window, as well as the package installer for Python, otherwise called PIP. It allows us to install, update, and manage third-party libraries and dependencies like PyTorch from the Python package index. To add PyTorch to our virtual environment workspace via PIP, we right-click on the library subfolder underneath .venv and choose Open Integrated Terminal. This should bring up VS Code's terminal window with our library folder as its target. We then type PIP or pip install torch. We also need to install another library called numpy, so we'll do both of those, and that will add the desired libraries to the virtual environment. If successful, and this is important to note, if successful, we should observe new folders being added to the library subfolder, including ones with names like numpy or torch. Before installing any dependencies, let's go ahead and try to run the PyTorch dependent code. So I'm going to take out the symbols that comment out those lines, use the play symbol in the top right hand corner to execute the script, and what we see is expected an error. Module not found error, no module named Torch is found. Okay, great. So now I am going to right click on the library site packages subfolder, click Open in Integrated Terminal, and now we can see the terminal is open and targeted at the folder which we desire, which is the library folder. Now I can use the package installer for Python to install Torch. So pip install torch, hit enter. Now let's keep an eye on the library folder up here because we expect to see this get larger. So we can already see it's grown. We have new subfolders in here. That's good. It means that it's installing Torch to this environment, not globally. We can see that the installation of PyTorch is complete, so we're back to our terminal prompt. And if we look in the library folder, we see that it's grown quite a bit. And most importantly, we have some folders named Torch, which again shows that we installed this to the appropriate environment. Now I also want to install numpy, so I'm going to go down to the terminal and again do pip install numpy. This one should be a little bit faster. So we see that numpy was successfully installed. The message down at the bottom here tells us so. We also see a new numpy folder within our libraries. Now that the appropriate dependencies are installed, we should be able to run this script up above without any problem. We don't have to change anything. So what we expect this script to do is to generate, well, still the hello world message. We expect it to generate a tensor or a matrix of size 2 by 3, height 2, width 3, and then display that to the user. Note that this second step could take a couple seconds here, so I'm going to go to the play button in the top right hand corner, which is going to execute it. So hit play. We don't expect to see any error messages. And the result is as expected. It still tells us hello world, and then it generates a tensor that is 2 by 3. So that demonstrates that not only is Python working within VS Code, but it's able to access the numpy and PyTorch dependencies. And this is a great jumping off point for doing more work in VS Code with Python that's related to machine learning. Finally, we want to ensure that PyTorch was installed only within our virtual environment. And this may be done by running a pretty simple Python script within VS Code's terminal window, as well as within Windows or within the Windows command prompt. We expect the former, VS Code, to execute without error, and the latter, the Windows command prompt, which represents global installations, to return the module not found error when we try to access PyTorch. Before the script, we must type Python and then enter that, which tells the terminal window or the command prompt that we intend to execute a Python script. So let's open a new terminal window within VS Code, one that's targeted to our main project folder. And what we want to do is run a pretty simple Python script that just returns the version of PyTorch that we have installed. If it's installed, then it should return a valid response. If it doesn't detect any installation of PyTorch, then it should return an error. So first thing I do here is type Python. That tells the terminal that we are going to be entering a Python script. I'm going to try to import the PyTorch library. Then I want to print, so torch dot underscore underscore version underscore underscore. This should just return the version of PyTorch that we're running, and we do expect to see the response right here. So we're running version 2.6. Again, this tells us that VS Code, our virtual environment, is registering PyTorch, and then we can simply exit. All right. Next, let's open up the command prompt, and this should tell us whether the global installation or any project within our system detects PyTorch. We don't want that to be the case. So again, I'm going to type in Python. I'm going to type import torch. Now, we expect to see the error here because we're trying to import a library or dependency to which the global workspace doesn't have any access. And there you go. Module not found. No module named torch. This virtual environment provides the basic setup required to develop more advanced Python scripts, including those related to machine learning, with the reassurance that changes to other projects and their dependencies will not affect this one or the one that we're working with. And so we are going to use this VS Code environment extensively in future modules on the topic of machine learning.